Hello and welcome back to Practically Political. As always, it's great to have you with us. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Good to have you all.
All right, Carrie, let's start. Why don't you fire away? As always, there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. It's interesting to see that the way that the country is going, the left has, in my opinion, not realized that they need to change. You see them throwing Molotov cocktails into Tesla dealerships. You see them firebombing Tesla dealerships. You see them obstructing in the Senate. This is an 80% thing to keep men out of women's sports. And yet the Senate Democrats wouldn't support this, and they canceled the House bill, and so it's stuck. And so men can take scholarships from women and cause bodily harm to the integrity of vulnerable women because Democrats don't want to compromise. They don't want to learn what's happened from the election. So I guess I'm curious, do you think who is the leader of the Democratic Party right now? And will this person be able to stop them from going off the rails?
Well, first of all, the incidents where you've had men competing in women's sports, you could count them on one hand. So it's been totally blown out of proportion. But having said that, I agree with you. It's an 80-20 or 90-10 issue. And I don't understand why the Dems have been such a dog with a bone. But the other side of that coin is I think the Trump administration has made a huge mistake by focusing too much on DEI stuff. And when you throw in, malice and incompetence are really a nasty combination. And I just have to, there's so many examples, but Pete Hegseth, that drunk, womanizing, totally unqualified second-rate TV host who ended up as our Secretary of Defense. Hey, Europe is pathetic with emojis and all caps. It's like the little kid who's trying to be cool because he knows he's in over his head. But in any case, they're trying to get words off the Pentagon website, and one of the words was gay. So literally, they took out Enola Gay, which, in case those of you who may not be up as much on your World War II history, that was the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. But this is just a typical example of the incompetence and the overreach. So what the president is not focusing on is the reason people elected him, which is lowering prices and addressing inflation. He said, I could care less if car prices go up. So already he's way underwater with the economy. This tariff thing is going to be a fiasco. People say, oh, no, he's just negotiating. Actually, no, tariffs are one of the few areas where he's been consistent over 40 years. He just likes tariffs. He doesn't understand how the global economy works. So we're really in for a nasty run. Will you at least acknowledge that his course in terms of trying to lower prices has been, to put it kindly, not ideally followed?
Well, if we look at the inflation figures, and we don't have them for March yet, but inflation fell in February, and core inflation, it fell to the lowest in 4 years.
That wasn't my question, though. My question was what the administration is doing, okay? Because all they're doing is tariffs are taxes on working class people. And you look at a lot of prices, they're already starting to go up, and almost 70% of the American public thinks he's not doing enough to lower prices. And even the Ben Shapiros of the world say the one thing that could derail the Trump train is an economic downturn. And this, to me, seems to be a crisis that's totally self-made.
Well, he has low. If you look at, again, I'm talking about the actual data. Gas prices
Talk
are
about actions, though. What has he done to lower prices?
Well, gas prices are significantly less. They're falling, and energy, of the top drivers of inflation is energy. And what he's done on that, the EPA has done a massive deregulatory effort. In fact, there's been an estimate that Trump has already chopped off $1,500 per household in regulatory reform. So he's doing a massive regulatory reform, which is great. But I want to respond on the tariff thing. So the way Trump is thinking about tariffs is that And Scott Bassett, our Treasury Secretary, noted there are a few different specific nationally strategic scenario or industries like steel, certain manufacturing ways that would, you mentioned World War II, specific industries that put us at a strategic disadvantage from a national security standpoint, that they want to have those things manufactured domestically so that we're not dependent on foreign markets. But then he said, once you get away from those few small areas, everything is everything he wants across the board for there to be more freedom.
Think up a good one.
They put up, they mentioned a study of over 600,000 products. And in 2/3 of these cases, foreign countries are charging higher tariffs against us than we charge against them. And so he's really looking to lower that and to say, we need to have free and fair trade, number one. But then also the way he thinks about tariffs is he thinks them not on taxes on the American middle class. He thinks of it as a tariff on a foreign market. That's how he's thinking about the tariffs.
So the tariff, the cost of the tariffs, do companies absorb those or do they get passed on to the consumers?
Look, I'm a free marketer. I understand consumer surplus, producer surplus. We don't have to get into the economics of yes.
Well, I'm just saying it's so Trump thinks of it that way, but that's total BS because the tariffs are a tax on working class people. They get passed on. And this idea, you have some simpleton like Peter Navarro saying, oh, we're going to raise 6 trillion over 10 years. Well, that's money that comes directly out of the pockets of working class people. That's the irony of Trump's economic policies is they screw the people that he is claiming to help. And again, we are the main problem. There's so many problems with this administration, but the main thing is they are disassembling brick by brick the world order that we've had for the last 80 years, whether it comes to our alliances, whether it comes to global trade. Yes, it'd be nice if we could go back to the 60s and 70s. Manufacturing jobs peaked in 1979, and they're not coming back. Certain industries that we need, like certain steel industries, pharmaceuticals, certain things that we need, say, during wartime. But even an American car, right, is for at least 40% of the parts are made overseas. The iPhone is an ecosystem. When you look at all the parts, there's like over 100 different markets create an iPhone. So you cannot just put the global order in reverse. It's just not going to happen. All it's going to do is irritate our allies, make us alone on the world stage. And again, when you look at how we're treating our alliances, it's really, really worrisome. And I think part of it is I remember growing up in New York, the things all people said about Trump is no books, no friends. And if you've never had any lifelong friendships, you can't understand that so much of foreign policy is relationships. And in Trump's mind, it's all transactional. What can you do for me now? Sometimes you have to have your friends back, maybe because you don't get anything right then, but they'll have your back down the road. And it's our alliances that have given us the security. So the two of the happiest countries right now are Russia and China. And speaking about that, what do you think about Canada becoming the 51st state or us taking Greenland? Are you finally willing to criticize the administration on those?
Well, okay. First of all, Trump is not the only person. There's a phrase that's very famous. There are no permanent friends. There are no permanent enemies. There are only permanent interests. That's a phrase that's been around for a long time.
Well, it's certainly not from NATO. And alliances is different. Alliances are not necessarily friendships. They're done for mutual benefit. What does Russia want most? To weaken NATO. Trump is giving him what he wants. But let's get back to Canada. Canada, the 51st state. What's the upside on that?
Okay, first of all, I want to respond to what you said about the 80-year world alliance. You're
World
right.
order. It served us best.
You're
We
right.
benefited the most.
Trump is seeking to disrupt the world order of the last post-World War II. He absolutely is. And that's what he was elected to do. And the reason why is because if you look at what happened after World War II, you had Germany's market was decimated. Their economy was decimated. Much of Europe was decimated. Japan was decimated. These economies needed to be rebuilt. And we, in our largesse and our generosity, we allowed them to take advantage of us. We gave them.
No, we created a system that helped us.
We created a
This
system
system
that
that you say,
doesn't.
how did they take
Let me
advantage
give
of
you
us?
some, let me
We
give you some
become the
statistics.
wealthiest country in the world.
Well, let me give you some statistics. Okay, for example, in Brazil, there's on ethanol imports to Brazil, we only put a 2.5% tariff.
You're not. You're getting off in the weeds.
No, I'm not. I'm giving you
Talk
specific
about
examples.
after World War II, taking apart the world order. That has nothing to do with ethanol in Brazil. That's current day. See, you can tell when you're losing an argument because you shift from the big picture to some micro thing.
You're
Talk about
asking
what's
you
the advantage
you
of
asked me for some specific examples, and I'm giving you
no,
some. So,
you're talking about something else. You're not talking
no,
about
I'm
the
not.
hand.
Dave, I'm talking about the fact that the developing world, of which Brazil is part of it, and the European economies in the post World War II were decimated. And so we gave them lower tariffs. We only charged 2.5% on ethanol to Brazil. They charge us 18%. And thus, last year, we imported $200 million in ethanol from Brazil, while we only exported 52 million. Here's another example. The European Union exports unlimited shellfish to America with zero tariffs, but the EU bans shellfish exports from the United States, from 48 of our states.
That's all great, Carrie. You're talking about things today. I'm talking about what's the advantage of dismantling our alliances? What's the advantage of taking apart a trade system that's benefited us? You give me these isolated examples, but the
These are
bottom
not isolated examples. I
benefited
just told you
more.
600,000
We have benefited more
examples.
from free trade than
There are
anybody.
literally 600,000 examples where we
Yes,
are.
but the bottom line is who's become the wealthiest country in the world? We have. What's the event? But go back to Canada. Do you think Canada should become the 51st state?
If they want to, yes.
Well, they obviously don't. They've said that they don't.
Some of them
So
don't.
what do you do now?
Some of them don't. And
No,
same
all of them don't.
Greenland. Greenland's only a few, like what, 30,000 people?
50,000, but whatever. But
Okay,
so
well,
what about Greenland?
that's like a Greenland's like a small city in terms of its population. And Denmark has done a pretty awful job at ensuring their national security. They're relying on our tailwinds, and they're riding our coattails. And the fact that we have.
So what's your point?
My point is that what Trump is saying is to them, to Greenland, it would be in your best interest to become part of a country that has your best interest and actually has the muscle to protect you.
When
Because
has Donald Trump had any other country's best interest at heart? That's BS. Nobody believes that. 6% of the people in Greenland want to join the US. Okay. Nobody wants to do it. They think they're doing fine. You look at the US, what's so frustrating is so many countries around the world look at the US and they say, you know what? We can't trust you economically. We can't trust you in terms of security. And more sadly, we can't trust you in terms of sharing our values. I mean, probably the thing that's gotten the least or the less attention that it deserves is this idea where the administration can just pick people up without due process and ship them out to some gulag in a foreign country. I mean, at least you can't you. I know you never criticized the Trump administration like since January 6th, but can you at least acknowledge that without if some people don't have due process, nobody has due process.
well, when you're talking about foreign raping criminal gangs,
We
who
don't
are
know. We
citizens
don't
who
know
are.
who these people are because they just pick them up. Usually you have a hearing, even if you're not a citizen, you're entitled to due process. They've already made a few mistakes. They've admitted they've made a few mistakes. And now the pathetic answer is, oh, we can't get them back. They're already gone. One person is taken away improperly. That's one too many. And we have no idea. That's the whole point of due process, because you find out, okay, are you really a criminal? A lot of these people have had no criminal record, and then they're abducting students, by plainclothes people in mass. And this one student was one of 30 students that signed an op-ed criticizing criticizing the war in Gaza. This is part of this whole slide towards authoritarianism, where you terrify people by just randomly. This is Stalin-esque. This is not something that you do in a free country. Can you at least acknowledge that?
Dave, I know that you really want me to attack certain people.
I'm not saying. I'm just asking you to acknowledge.
I don't believe in attacking anybody. I
you don't agree in attacking the Trump administration.
I didn't attack Joe Biden. I disagreed with his policies.
I'm not asking you, when did I attack Trump? I'm attacking his policies. This is a policy.
You literally just said, I want you to say something bad about Trump.
That's not what I said. You put words in my mouth. I said, for once, criticize something he's done. It's the second time you've tried to say, oh, I'm asking you to say bad things. I'm not. I'm just asking you for once to do what all of my other Trumpster friends do and say, he's not perfect. I don't agree with this policy. I don't agree with that policy. But you won't do that. And that's okay. That's certainly your right. But don't try to sugarcoat it and rationalize it, because there's no rationalizing. Here's a good chance. If we don't have due process in this country, isn't that a problem?
Look, even Elon Musk himself said,
okay. Go ahead.
Even Elon Musk has said they're going to make mistakes. Okay? Everybody makes mistakes. Do you think I want people to make mistakes? No, I don't, Dave.
Well, then the way to avoid that is having due process. That's the whole point of due process. And because when you pick people up, you allow them to talk to a lawyer. You find out, hey, we think they're a criminal. Maybe we misrepresented the tattoos they were wearing. Maybe we confused them with someone else. By the way, both of those have happened, and the administration has acknowledged it. So that's the whole point. But if we don't have due process,
you're acknowledging that the
government can just pick up yeah. But now then the excuse was, oh, well, it's too late. They're gone. I mean, this was acknowledged in a free society. That's Stalin-esque.
Dave, this is what's so you're to me, you're sounding like a Democrat. Like you would literally rather defend a man who is documented in court.
I am not. I'm not defending a man. You're changing the argument. What I'm saying is we don't have due process. We don't. This administration is not offering due process, which is the most important elements in the foundation of a free society. It's like they're intimidating the press, intimidating these lawyers, banning the AP because they won't call the Gulf of Mexico, stuff like this. I mean, this is again, for our viewers, if you want to look at what's going on here, look at what happened to Viktor Orban. It's a total parallel. He lost, he won, came back again, as did Hugo Chavez, by the way. The only difference is they're doing it much faster here. But everything, you attack the judiciary, you go after the institutions of government, you terrify people, you get rid of due process, you attack the media, you attack the institutions of higher learning and of medical science. All this stuff is happening. And you're just sitting there whistling past the graveyard. And, there's a level of complicity here that's really pretty jaw-dropping. I mean, if you won't defend due process and you keep saying, oh, well, it's because there's murderers. We don't know. We don't know who's a murderer.
U.S. citizens. That's
the whole point of due process. They've made a mistake. If they make one mistake, that a good administration would say, oh, we made a mistake. So from now on, let's have due process. Is that happening here? No.
Dave, U.S. citizens have different rights than non-citizens. That's a fact.
And it's also a fact that everyone is entitled to due process.
Like you said if one person has due process, if one violent criminal, illegal alien has their due process violated, that's not.
I said if one mistake.
What I say is that one U.S. citizen who is murdered or raped by an illegal alien is one person too much.
I agree. And no one disagrees that criminals should be put out here. But it's the same thing about that guy, Mohammed Khalik, Okay, he's here. He has a green card, and just because it basically comes down to if you say things that the administration doesn't like, that makes you, a supporter of terrorism or an enemy of the state, or whatever term they want to use, and then they keep falling back on, oh, well, there's all these murderers who were illegal aliens. And first of all, illegal aliens commit crimes at the lowest rate. We've talked about this many times because they don't want to get caught. But there are some. And every illegal alien, even though it's against New York law, I didn't mind even them going into Rikers and sending the criminals home who were in prison. I think that should absolutely happen. But that's what you have due process for. Just so you don't send people back mistakenly. And here, when you send them to a foreign gulag, once they're gone, they're gone. It's not like they're in.
I just think it's important to acknowledge that the citizen versus non-citizen, it's a totally different system.
No, everyone's entitled to due process. Everyone's entitled to due process in this country, whether you're a citizen or not.
But if you have different rights, and that's what.
Right. But will you acknowledge that everyone is entitled to due process? It says that in the Constitution. Everyone's entitled to due process, whether you're a citizen or not.
It's undeniable that citizens have different rights than non-citizens.
You're not answering the question. So is everyone entitled to due process? Yes or no?
Everyone is entitled to the rights they have as a citizen.
See, whenever you don't answer the question, I can tell that you're wrong. But anyway, so what about Greenland? So what should the U.S. do with Greenland? Because only 6% of the people in Greenland want to join the U.S. So it's not going to happen. So the only option is to take it by force. Should he do that, or what should he do?
Well, I think, again, to the post-war order, Trump is letting the rest of the world know. So part of why Greenland thinks that they're safe is because they're living under this illusion that Denmark is actually providing that security when they're not. We are. We have
not anymore. That's a whole nother wonderful ramification of Trump's awful foreign policy, is that because people don't feel that they can trust our nuclear umbrella, all these other countries are going to go and get nuclear weapons. Gee, what could possibly go wrong there?
You mean the NATO countries might actually do what they had said they would do with their defense?
You're talking about, hey, I've agreed that they should spend more on defense, and they are. But spending more on defense is far different than saying, oh, well, we may not live by Article 5. And that was the one thing about, and we don't need to get into the whole signal gate, though it shows you what a bunch of clowns this administration is when it comes to their foreign policy. But the one thing that came through loud and clear was the antithesis towards Europe, or the enmity towards Europe. And you had Pete Hegseth, oh, it's pathetic. You have our vice president saying that it's more important to stand with dictators than it is to support our European friends. And as Canada said, and by the way, the Liberals in Canada are so thankful, because thanks to Trump's idiotic policy, the Liberal Party was down 20 points. Pierre Poilievre was going to win, but now Mark Carney has come back and he's actually ahead. So thank you, Donald Trump, from all the Liberals in Canada. But in any case, he said, look, the relationship as we know it is over, because we just can't trust our trading partner because we're bashing him over the head. And these tariffs are nothing like first Trump tariffs. Those were pretty mild. The whole thing is going to blow up. And speaking of blowing up, aren't you kind of happy to see what a faceplant Elon did in Wisconsin last night?
I don't think it was a faceplant so much as status quo, because the votes on the court have not changed. It's still the margin that it was. The Democrats.
Yeah, but you're changing the subject, because I know you're losing the argument. But in terms of the election, Elon put his personal reputation. This is a state in Wisconsin, by the way. The last 3 presidential elections have been decided by less than 1%. It was 10%. It was a landslide by Wisconsin standards. And part of that was the personal revulsion that people feel towards Elon. And so I guess my question is, Trump hates failure. So how long do you think Elon lasts? Because
Well, they had a voter ID constitutional amendment that passed by 2/3, which was
okay.
something that Elon was also supporting. And
Well, of
there's also
course, I mean, everybody supports that. I
no,
mean,
they
that,
don't. No, they don't.
yes.
A lot of Democrats actually don't.
By,
Uh,
by,
but
by the way, well, now they do. My point with voter ID has been, I'm certainly fine with it. I don't think it's necessary because there's voter fraud is a classic conservative solution in search of a problem. It doesn't exist even in states that they've tried to find it. But look, there's nothing wrong with having more security. So I'm all for that. But that was something that was going to pass. But this Supreme Court thing was really just a total rejection of Elon. And he come into a heartland state, thinks he can buy the election. And the citizens of Wisconsin said, F you. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
you had, I mean, but the thing is that the Democrat judge received a lot more funding, completely
What?
outspent. Yes, absolutely. I believe it was like at least 2-1 margin. You had George Soros came in.
Of course, we always have to bring George Soros in. But
If that follow the money, and so they had tens of millions of dollars more, and so
but the point is, they didn't need it. All they needed was Elon. He was his own worst enemy, and to sit him up there with some cheesehead thing on, it was almost cringeworthy. So we'll see. But now that he's failed, as he's failing with Doge, which is neither a department nor efficient. And I guess the thing that gets me is if they're really serious about trying to cut the debt, then they should say, you know what? We need to just have tax cuts for working class people. We don't need to have tax cuts for wealthy people. But I don't know. I have a feeling somehow that that's not quite going to happen. So let's save $40 billion so we can have a $4 trillion tax cut. And by the way, also, as far as Doge goes, the one chance where I was really hoping they would do something is on the Pentagon. Because I think we can all admit there is no area that has more waste and more unnecessary weapons than the Pentagon, right? And so Elon said a few years ago, we don't need a new generation of fighter jets because drones are becoming so much more efficient. And he's absolutely right. So what happens? We just ordered a new generation of jets, the B-47. Trump's the 47th president. Get it? And he's like, we're going to order a lot of them. So they literally, are you ready for this? It's hard to say without laughing. $900 billion budget. They're going to cut almost 600 million. Woo! Can you at least acknowledge that they should cut more than that?
You might not like to hear this, but Elon Musk has repeatedly said there is waste, fraud, and abuse at DoD. And he has said the fact that the Pentagon has failed multiple audits is not okay to be normalizing that. So look, Dave, like one reason why I've enjoyed working with you over the last 4 years is because you respect the common sense of the American people. You travel around in an RV talking to people who support Trump. And so it makes me sad how much you seem like you want Trump to fail. And
That's
that
not
really
what I
makes me
said.
sad.
You're
It
putting
makes
words in my
me
mouth.
sad.
We
I'm
said
just telling
back
you how
in
I feel.
January, I said he's our president. I want him to succeed. Remember I told you, I said I've never wanted to be wrong more in my life. I've told you that several times. I said, I'm hoping that a year from now, we're sitting around and I say, God, I was so wrong. He didn't do all the tariff stuff. The economy's continued to improve. He has smart foreign policy. He didn't parrot Russian talking points, all this stuff. But again, if 10 is worst case scenario, we're at about a 9.5. So this is about every bit as bad as I thought. As far as the Pentagon going, of course, Musk can say, oh, we need to cut, they failed audits. But the bottom line is when they had a chance to actually cut where it matters, they didn't. They fell down on it. And it just shows to go my point. This is about dismantling government. It's not about reforming it. And they don't understand soft power, which is what USAID is. They're the worst administration towards veterans. One out of every 3 government jobs is held by a veteran. So there are a lot of homeless vets. and they're cutting services at the VA. Cutting 19,000 employees at the IRS is just going to allow people to cheat more and have to wait longer on their tax returns or their tax refunds. So, again, when people start feeling the personal consequences of this, like closing Social Security offices, there's just, again, it saves a small amount of money. The federal workforce is 2 to 3% of our budget. It's nothing. But again, it's dismantling government. So we'll see. This whole thing is going to blow up. The question is, how much damage will have been done by then? My theory is that they feel, okay, we have about a year and a half until the midterms. We're not going to do very well in the midterms. So let's see how much we can break before then. But again, I wish I was wrong. I wish I was wrong.
Look, Dave, it's so interesting because if you actually talk to Republicans, he's got something like a 90% approval rating.
So, not on the economy.
On Republican issues,
not on tariffs.
And I said this on CNN a couple weeks ago. If you look at polling, NBC News, and they reported this on Meet the Press, found the highest level of optimism in the United States in 21 years.
I don't know what stats the consumer confidence hit its lowest level in a long time. People are very bearish on the economy. Goldman Sachs just raised its probability for a recession. As I said, more than 2/3 of the country thinks he's not doing enough on the economy. People do not approve of this lack of due process. So again, Elon said he was going to take an audit and present it to Congress. If you want to look at how you can actually really cut spending and do it well, go back to Al Gore when Clinton first got in. He worked with Congress. He cut $140 billion, which may not sound a lot, but keep in mind that the budget back then was only $1.5 trillion as opposed to almost $7 trillion now. Not a single lawsuit. So that's how you would do it if you really wanted to make government more efficient, if you really wanted to streamline it. Because everyone agrees that there's waste, fraud, and abuse. But the people signed up for a scalpel, not a wrecking ball. And
but the problem is that people promise a scalpel and they never deliver. And so what Trump is doing is he's ripping off the Band-Aid and saying, if we want actual healing, we have to go for something bigger because these fake scalpels have never materialized. And so it's as much as people scream and howl, like the USAID, for example, this became basically a slush fund for leftist ideology. And it also created, in many cases, I just spoke to someone who worked at USAID for a long time. She left, and this is well before Trump. She left well before Trump because she became very disillusioned with foreign aid in general. Because what it does is it creates a cycle of dependency in the same way that our domestic welfare systems create cycles.
Please give me a break. You're comparing people living off of welfare checks, which is examined, to life-saving vaccines.
No, I'm not talking about those.
And by the way, when you look at
Dave, you're putting words in my mouth.
No,
you're putting words in my mouth, Dave Spencer, you're putting words in my mouth.
No, I'm not.
I am not against life-saving vaccines. I'm against corrupt programs that are aligned.
You create a false equivalency.
Programs.
It's a false equivalence. Okay, and this is what the right is Trumpsters are great at doing. It's like, well, Hillary Clinton was just as bad as Donald Trump in terms of trying to overturn the election. I mean, it's total bullshit, BS. But in any case, here's the thing. Soft power is one of the most important powers that we have. And I have a $40 billion budget. The real key was you looked on Sean Hannity, and he was scrolling down. It was like 5 million for this, 70,000 for this. Yeah, of course, there's a few minor things. And by the way, you may not agree on where that money was going, but there was no evidence of fraud. There was no evidence that people were embezzling those funds. They may not have gone to places that certain people agree with, but those are, $5 million is nothing. Most of it is handing out food. And by the way, it's the best marketing in the world. People wear T-shirts saying compliments of the U.S. government. It's life-saving vaccine. It's an AIDS program that George W. Bush started, which has saved so many people. And then as far as this the scalpel doesn't work thing. It's so disorganized. They fired people from the National Nuclear Safety Administration, then they had to hire them back. They fired people from the CDC that were working on bird flu, and then they had to hire them back. Now RFK is coming in and firing 10,000 people. And it's so random. And it's from, if you look at, you always talk about fentanyl and opioid deaths. We've had great reduction in deaths. And part of that is a substance abuse program within the HHS, which is one of the most unheralded successes. That's being cut. Again, it's a wrecking ball. They have no idea what they're doing. And it's really going to start affecting the life of ordinary Americans. And when people start dealing with personal consequences, that's when there's going to be a reaction, and that's when you're going to start seeing more. So we will see, but it certainly hasn't been dull.
Yeah, and like Dave, I hope you're wrong too. and I think that when you,
so far I'm right, but I hope I will turn out to be wrong.
I think you're wrong, respectfully. I love and care about you as a friend, but we disagree. And when you look at so many, again, I think my voice is very representative in many cases of the vast majority of Republicans, which is so many of my Republican friends are waking up and saying, every day is like Christmas. I'm so excited. This is exactly what I voted for. So it's almost like we're living in two different universes, Dave, where it's like you're seeing the dark side of everything, and I'm seeing there's a change here. And I think the approach of, this approach to hiring and firing is really the Vivek Ramaswamy approach, which he calls zero-based budgeting, where you basically have to justify what you're doing. And as a taxpayer, that's what they voted for. People who pay payroll taxes, people who pay sales taxes at the state level. People want to know that their money is being used frugally, wisely, and not being used for programs. Look, we can agree on emergency things, medical vaccines, but like I'm talking about overall flooding the market on a constant daily basis of chronic dependency. What it ends up doing, for example, just as an example, there was a shoe company in the US where it said if you buy a pair of shoes, we donate a free pair in the developing world. Well, what ends up and we saw that actually the woman I mentioned who had worked for USAID, she saw this with mosquito nets where well-meaning people donated a bunch of mosquito nets to sub-Saharan Africa, and it ends up destroying the local manufacturers, people who could create jobs and create their own domestic manufacturing nets or their own shoe manufacturing. It ends up destroying their markets, and so they can't create their own jobs. They can't lift themselves out of poverty. So that's really the long-term game that Trump is doing by breaking down. And then you've also got the crazy projects that you mentioned, the Sean Hannity projects of crazy woke projects in countries that don't even want it half the time.
That's not true.
So,
but in any case, and I don't know what some abstruse example you're giving about a shoe company, but I can give you a lot of examples where tariffs are killing local businesses because all of a sudden they're going to have to charge 25 or 50% more. And no one wins in a trade war. It's a question of who loses less. And the fact that, again, that we're going after our most loyal trade partners here. And again, Trump doesn't really understand how the economy works. And so there's this whole thing about, well, we have a trade deficit. I have a trade deficit with a lot of people that I buy things from. It's just not that simple. And as far as the other stuff goes, in terms of the cuts, we'll see. People are gonna, but it's affecting personal people's lives. And the thing is, when it comes to where the money really is, they're not cutting. They're going after the weak organizations. They're going after like the U.S. Institute for Peace. They even own their own building, and yet they're trying to give their building away. Again, this is stuff that doesn't happen in democratic countries, and there's definitely going to be a pushback. And But the honeymoon, I think, with the signal gate is the end of the honeymoon because it's something that sticks and it shows just how incompetent the administration is on many levels. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to pay the price for that for quite a while. But sadly, we've been going on for a long time. Always scintillating conversation, but I think sadly for our viewers, you are going to be moving on. Is that true? What's your plan?
Yeah, no, it's been, I think we spent 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, and basically the Biden administration and the first part here of the Trump administration breaking things down. And I think the fact that we're in a new era where it's a new chapter. And I'm looking forward to seeing where you guys are going to take Practically Political.
Well, thank you, and I wish you again. I wish you all the best, and I think that a lot of our viewers understand that for whatever reason you don't feel that you can criticize anything, and it's too bad because it shows you again that the authoritarian system that a lot of people feel that we're in, where in a healthy democracy you would be able to criticize constructively certain policies, but you don't feel the ability to even do that, which means that you must be worried about something. Because when we first started, you were much more open about criticizing things that you didn't believe Trump had done well or that Republicans had done well. So I hope you get to a point where you're not feeling so confined.
I don't feel confined, Dave. I really don't.
Okay. Well, you certainly seem that way.
And people like to throw that word authoritarian around, and I laugh because it's like, or even during the election, they threw the word Nazi around, and it's like, if everyone's a Nazi, you're a Nazi, and the word authoritarian to me, I'll have to look up the dictionary meaning of it, but it typically means someone who wants more power versus someone who wants to give the power back to the people and to shred layers and layers of bureaucracy, to shrink.
So what I'm hearing from you is that Trump wants to give the power back to the people. He doesn't want more power from himself. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, yes, by shrinking bureaucracy. Literally, he's shrinking the bureaucracy.
Our viewers,
what kind of
I have no further questions, Your Honor. If she says with a straight face, Trump wants to give the power back to the people. Absolutely. He doesn't want more for himself.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a perfect way to end because it shows you exactly where she is.
Dave, the fact that
you're just keep on digging.
Dave, I thought this show was about having a respectful dialogue, and I respect you, Dave. Even if I disagree with you, I'm not going to mock you.
I'm not mocking you, but I'm just saying it's so hypocritical when you say it's bringing power back to the people, and almost everything these executive steps are showing are disregarding the Constitution, are disregarding the rule of law. But anyway, we could go around in circles on that for a long time, which we have. But I wish you very well. I know we will keep in touch. It's been an amazing 4 years. I've loved our conversation. We never got into a single argument, despite very spirited disagreements. It was always done with a smile, and I think that was the best thing we had going for us on this show.
Thank you, Dave.
Awesome. On that note, thanks again for joining us on Practically Political. It's always a pleasure. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. God bless.